So welcome to this fifth and last results webinar of the Future Resilience Project. My name is Matías Barberis. I'm the coordinator of the project and a researcher at Epicenter. And today I have the pleasure to share the virtual floor, with two of the labs and some colleagues that will help me drive this webinar today, that will be featuring the BAPEMED and the IMMER Labs, BAPEMED in Bulgaria and IMMER in the cross-border setting of France and Germany in the Strasbourg-Kiel area. And as a cross-cutting topic, we will be discussing about data governance and the intersection of these topics with resilience. As usual, first I would like to present a bit what would be the agenda for today. So after a brief introduction about the project, we will have the two labs presenting on the hand of Vensislava Dasheva and Martin Kruse for the BAPEMED lab, Vensislava from the Bulgarian Association of Personalized Medicine and Martin of the Copenhagen Institute for Future Studies. And then for the IMMER lab, we will have Jean-Alain Leroux from the Association de Prospective Renan here in France, and Didier Raffin from the Hochschule Kiel, both partners and team members of the IMMER lab. And then we will have an expert, Philin Warke from Fraunhofer EC, that will make the connection between the two labs. And then finally, Caterina Rondoni from the University of Ferrara that will handle all the questions and answers from your side. So the presentations will go one after the other, but if you have any questions to the presenters, you can use the question and answer button that is on the Teams, and then we will pick them up after the two presentations. If any of you have also the chat open, you can also use the chat option. So either the question and answer or the chat could be good for making the questions or comments. A little bit about the project. So we are coming to the end slowly. So the Future Resilience Project is part of the knowledge valorization policy area and looks to strengthen the European economic and social resilience, looking to create more the ability to different type of stakeholders and policymakers to adapt and quickly respond to future crises. So the idea is no matter what would be the crisis, the idea is to create capacity and be prepared for what's coming next. And to do that, we have set up an experimentation phase with 10 future resilience labs. I think this is one of the most innovative parts of the project, that we're working with foresight and participative methodologies to work exactly with these different type of challenges. In this case, today we will have BAPEMED that was working with the healthcare system and the crisis associated and challenges to this area. And then we've got the IMMER lab working with mobility and energy as cross-cutting topics. But then we have been working with other labs on the area of labor market, climate change, disasters, housing issues, social integration, and so on and so forth. All of them are available on the website, so you can navigate and check a bit what they were working on. A bit of the behind the scenes, the project is a consortium of 14 institutions led by Epicenter, and including all these institutions that you can see here on the screen. And we have put some faces, just not to see only the institutional logos, but to see the real faces. We started our way also with some virtual meetings, as we started very back in time when we were out of the COVID pandemic, but then we managed to meet in Ferrara and in Sweden and in other occasions as well during the project. Some key facts and figures about the project. So we've got an open call for the labs. So the 10 labs, 7 of them were funded through an open call in which we received 45 applications coming for 21 European countries. Around 2.6 million euros were requested in terms of funding, and we granted 403,000 for the labs to run and to implement the activities. In these 10 labs, more than 130 stakeholders were involved across all the labs. We ran 40 workshops in total across Europe. And of course, we did a few thematic webinars inviting external experts with over 200 attendees. We organize also policy roundtables with more than 70 participants. And I think the slide went off probably, so sorry for that. Just a second, I will set it back. Voila. So we've got 27 policymakers, and okay, well, we also have an important presence on social media with more than 1,500 people involved. In terms of the methodological approach of the project, this is how it looks like in paper. So all the labs were going through a framing phase in which they were trying to analyze the different challenges, and we will see today how they did it. Then they went through a stage of scenario development, so how these challenges would evolve or change over the time. And then finally, they did the policy testing phase using different sources to test how different policies could fit into the different scenarios. In practice, this graphic looks like that in some of the pictures. So this is how the different labs were working, from prototyping using science fiction, as we will see today, using different mapping techniques, participatory techniques, projections on design, etc., etc. So as we mentioned, you can navigate different sources of the project, especially the knowledge base that we have created, including more than 600 policy documents that includes different type of actions in different areas like housing, energy, mobility, etc., that could help you define also policies to tackle or to strengthen resilience. Then we have several policy briefs also available on the website and on our Zenodo, where you can also find the different reports of the project. We have flyers of the labs in case you don't want to hear a lot about them in English, so you can navigate them in the local language. So if you're based in France or in Germany, you can navigate the French, German ones, or if you're in Bulgaria, you can read the flyer of the BAPEMED in Bulgarian. Also, we have a YouTube channel where you can see all the webinars that we have created, including the results webinar. As you can see here, today we are in the last of the fifth webinar that we were doing to showcase a bit the results of the different labs. And so you can actually rewatch the recordings of the webinars of the past four, and of course enjoy the one that we have going on today. So I will stop sharing now here the presentation, and I would like to invite already the first of the labs of today. We will start with the IMMER Lab. So I would like to introduce Jean-Alain Hérault and Didier Raffin that will present the results of the IMMER Lab. That is a lab based in Strasbourg area, and I will let them present a bit more the lab and the results in detail. So Jean-Alain, Didier, the floor is yours.
Jean-Alain, il faut mettre ton micro.
Voilà, you can hear me, but now, okay. Microphone, camera. So the result, can you see my result?
Yes,
the PowerPoint?
It's not a on full screen. You have to share it on full screen.
Ah, okay. So let's try. Is it okay? Okay.
Not really.
I think but that's fine for now. You can just go back to the first slide. I think we can see properly.
Okay.
We can.
Is it right now? Good. So good morning, everybody. Thank you for listening to the IMMER results. I will share with Didier Raffin this presentation. But I will start by the text. Okay. And I will ask Matthias, please, to tell me if I'm something like 5 minutes before the end or 1 minute before the end.
Okay.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, now I start by the presentation of the team. So as Matthias said, we are a 2-national team. We have people from Strasbourg, France, and people from Kiel, Germany. We live very close one to another, and we have worked on common territory, which is the territory of the, let's say, the greater Strasbourg area, which also expands to the German community of Kiel. So the persons that were particularly in charge of the project and who participated to the redaction of the final report are myself. So I represent Association de Prospective Rhénane, APR. So it's an association devoted to foresight, and more specifically, foresight in the Upper Rhine area. Emmanuel Müller is the co-director of the lab, and he works for the Hochschule Kiel in Germany. Didier Raffin, who is here with us, is also from the Hochschule Kiel. And 2 younger researchers, Lise Martins-Nouri from the University of Strasbourg. She's PhD, she's doing a PhD there, and Mats Gram, who is also doing a PhD in Germany and works in Kiel. Just to know, we decided to call the whole team, so these people here on the slide and the rest of the team, we call that the squad team. R squad, R for resilience, because they also worked on other projects on related topics. It's important because I will come back to that at the end of my presentation. One of the interesting follow-up of the IMMER project within Future Resilience is the fact that we also developed our activities and very similar tools, methodological tools, on other topics with other partners, mostly also in the Upper Rhine Valley, in Alsace and Baden. Okay. So what's exactly our aim? It's to enhance resilience in the cross-border Strasbourg-Kiel area. And we focus more specifically on issues of mobilities and energy. And we decided to take 2050 as a foresight horizon. We enrolled actors like local public authorities, so the municipalities of Strasbourg and Kiel, for instance, but also the harbors, because Strasbourg and Kiel have harbors. And we also tried to have stakeholders in the area of the industry, or more precisely in the sector of energy and mobility. And these stakeholders with us addressed the challenge of potential big crises that potentially affect the territory, or right now affected. So climate change, we already see some effects, some impact of climate change in this area, definitely, but it could be, and it will probably be worse. And so we try to to figure out very big events, crisis events linked to climate change. But other difficulties could arise linked to war, cyber attacks, or social collapse for any reason, for instance, health, like pandemic, etc. Three very important milestones in our work were the 3 workshops we organized with the partners, and using a specific method we developed for that, which is narrative foresight. It's a foresight approach which uses narratives like science fiction, dystopic stories, and people are immersed into these stories, and it's like a mental immersion in a dystopic future. So this is the work we did. So in this case, it's in Strasbourg, but very close to Germany, in a place close to the harbor. What were the challenges? We wanted to create a common knowledge. It means, in this case, a common representation of the future. And a common knowledge in a group with a certain heterogeneity. So this is interesting because the group is heterogeneous. All these people are interested by foresight and crisis and resilience, but they come from different feedbacks and also linguistic areas, cultures, etc. And the idea with dystopic science fiction narratives is to push people out of their zone of mental comfort. So one challenge we had not in mind at the beginning, it's interesting to underline it once we have did it, it's the importance of finding not just official representatives of the institution, like the municipalities or the enterprises, etc., but representatives from these institutions or organizations that are individually motivated by addressing the future. So we were relatively lucky because most of the people we have put together were individually motivated. But the next time we do such an exercise, maybe we will put an important stress in not only contacting the participants, the participant institutions, but asking them, can you send somebody who has really the feeling of foresight and resilience issues in the future? Some of these people are also fans of science fiction, so, and it's not bad. The methodological approach. We started reviewing the literature on resilience issues, and we did a series of interviews on the topic. Then we had to prepare and perform the workshop. And the 3 workshops were linked one with another, so every one was built on the results of the preceding workshop. And okay, at the end, we decided to debrief the whole thing with a set of actors, particularly the municipalities and other public authorities, to share and review our results and looking for a lasting process of interactive activity among the stakeholders. It's what we call creating a neo-Portalan support. A Portalan in the Renaissance time was a map used by navigators, by sailors, and particularly for entering harbors, with a lot of difficulties for that. These charts were constantly rewritten by the users. So this is the concept we want to take, and we call that neo-porcelain. So it means we need a sort of mental chart, which is not given for eternity, but that will be changed regularly with the experience of the people confronted with the topic. We will return to that if we have time enough. What's the evidence we used? We started from former knowledge of the issue, or the own experience of the team, the literature reviews. We interviewed 10 stakeholders before designing the workshops. And we also gathered interesting information from the Future Resilience Network during all the process. The stakeholders, more precisely, as I said, municipalities are important partners, of course. So Strasbourg and Kehl municipalities, the two harbors, industries, but also specialized persons in the domain of risk management, like fire brigade, etc. We also wanted to have representatives of the state, the national state, or the region, in the case of Germany, the land. Because as we will conclude, one of the conclusions is that we have to manage on the territory with local actors. It's very important, and they are very active. But we cannot discard the fact that we can act locally only in link with the upper levels of governance. So at one time, at one or another time, we will have to do with, or sometimes against, the instructions or the protocols that are created by upper level institutions. And to finish up, we also had academic people, typically from the Beta lab or the KIAF in Kehl. How did we frame the problem? The first issue was to find the most relevant issues in the general frame. So what is the impact of the future crisis on energy and mobility in the cross-border area, Strasbourg-Kehl? For these people, we had the 10 interviews I already mentioned, and on the basis of this material, we wrote the basic scenarios. And we decided to follow the following themes. Thanks to all the experience and information we had, the three themes, the three big crises we considered in our narrative foresight exercise were fluvial tsunami, so a sort of big inundation on the river, societal collapse, and for instance, for health region, for epidemics also, or other reasons. And the blackout scenario, which has, of course, a lot to do with energy. So if electricity is cut, we are in a blackout situation. How will we manage these things? And the three themes were systematically reviewed in every workshop. So here are the three scenarios: tsunami, blackout, and collapse, socio-economic collapse. How did we develop the scenarios? So during the first workshop in July, so 1 year ago, the 3 scenario topics were presented. Each one was explored in a little more than half an hour. And the groups of participants were rotating on every theme and considered 3 periods. First, the situation at the moment of the crisis, so where we have to deal with urgency. The situation 1 year later, so in this case, 2051, because we have also to deal with more lasting issues than the very first. And back to present, 2025, in present to prepare the future resilience. So we have visited the future. Now, what conclusion do we derive from such an experience, a mental experience? So the groups that rotated on every issue reflected the variety of participants. So we tried to have tables with French and German, for instance, and different professions, always trying to have heterogeneity. The discussion mostly were in natural language, French and German. So sometimes we use English for sort of short summing up, etc. But it was very important that native languages will be used in order to put people really like in real life and living this scenario very lively. Of course, we had to manage this. And since many people in the squad, in the R squad, are bilingual, so it was easy to have at each table people that could help a little these discussions in 2 languages. The aim of the second workshop last November was to take over the outcome of the first one, to refine it, and to use it to simulate a journey into the future. So the method is dystopian science fiction narratives. He explained also why it offers a realistic immersion, which is more interesting for many aspects than a classical foresight method, interviewing experts. And we also implemented another method, the TOSA method, which is threats, opportunities, stakes, and action, to identify key stakes and formulate actions. And finally, the matter was synthesized by 3 participants that were acting as personae, and they played the role of 3 different people. So one played the role of a high-ranking regional policymaker, another played the role of the head of a disaster management unit, like a fire brigade, for instance. And the third persona was a young, successful entrepreneur. The last workshop in March brought 25 participants in 2 groups, one on a French-speaking table, the other on a German-speaking table. And they worked on the following issues. First, the possibility of developing this neo-portolan I already mentioned, so a cartography of the near and distant future that is regularly rewritten by the stakeholders. Is this project possible? Does it exist already in a certain way? So this is what the topic of this part of the discussion. The second issues in this last workshop was the dissemination of narratives, not among experts, but with the residents. And we finished with thinking of designing resilience kits if possible, to prepare the population for the future disasters. Okay, so we did post-it note and other sort of things like that to deal with the discussion and keep a memory of what has been said. As for the policy solution that can be derived from our experience. First, the narratives can really be a powerful instrument. So we had this intuition, but we confirm. It enables actors to anticipate and prepare for future threats. The chosen format, which is dystopian science fiction story, was fully accepted by the stakeholders we had. However, this exercise with actors was with actors that are in a position to formulate strategic plans. It still has to be tested on the general public. Okay, I should hurry up to go to the end. Policy solution also, what are the core aspects of the method? We can return to that point in the question and answer if you want. So narrative foresight must be conceived as an exercise of community building with heterogeneous actors. So the question of continuation beyond the exercise is raised. Will such a community be started with the exercise? Last point, the international and intercultural dimension is not a handicap. You just need to find a good format for discussion with translation, but it's very interesting, in fact, to have international exercises. Main ideas. So we have tested several types of major crises. But the type of impacts and the resilience strategy to consider are partly the same. So it's interesting to see this intersection with three different catastrophes, but a large part of the issues and the policy solution are very similar. As a consequence, we should not design policies in silos. Just one policy for the earthquake, one policy for the flood, one policy for the fire, for whatsoever. We must prepare the population in a more generic term. And among the transversal issues in every topic, resilience is correlated with health and social status. The age groups are important. They do not react the same way. The general level of trust is very important, etc. And we have a problem of multi-level relationships between national, regional, local, even European level. And it's not granted that we have a good coordination of these levels. Other ideas, all policies need to encourage public engagement and to benefit from what's called hybrid resources. Because the population can help a lot by self-organizing. And professionals of risk and policymakers should not put aside the possibility of the self-organization of the population. Right now, in the case of the Ukrainian war, we know the importance of the population. Conclusion, the lab IMMER is linked to societal resilience in a cross-border area, we know that. The interface between France and Germany could be considered as a difficulty, but in fact, it was easy to overcome the difference of culture, language, etc. And it proved to be intellectually very stimulating. And then the foresight method can be successfully applied. The policymakers were happy to play along and readily to accept this form of dystopian foresight. So if you want to do it, just go ahead. It's possible and it's not a priori rejected. But there is a personal dimension already underlined. Participants representing their institution should have their own individual interest. It's not everybody in the institution, like a community or an enterprise, etc. It's not everybody that has the same feeling for doing that. So please invite people that like it. Okay, impact. Well, all the work done by the R Squad also gave rise to other projects. And we hope to develop in the next year a platform where people can meet and collectively capitalize experience. We can return in the question and answer if necessary and give more precision on the new projects we already have or we plan to develop. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Jean-Alain. So that was very much on time, right? 25 minutes. So thanks a lot. That was a very interesting presentation. I think many of us, we have already too many questions, so I would invite everyone to please keep using the question and answer button or the chat if you have it enabled. And without any delay, I would like to give the floor to our second lab of the presentations of today, which is the BAPEMED lab. So I would like to introduce again Vensislava Dasheva from the Bulgarian Association of Personalized Medicine and Martin Kruse from the Copenhagen Institute for Futures Studies. So Vensislava, the floor is yours. You're muted, Vensislava, just in case.
So let me come back to the presentation. Sorry for this delay. Well, distinguished guests, dear colleagues, welcome to our result webinar number 5, Data, Governance and Resilience. As Matthias introduced it ourselves, my name is Vensislava Dacheva from the Bulgarian Association for Personalized Medicine, and today, together with my colleague Martin Kruse, we're going to present the results, the work, and the achievements of BAPEMED Lab. So let me first introduce the team. As most of the other labs, they have two partners. One are the mentors and the foresight experts. In our case, this is the Copenhagen Institute for Future Studies. And the team is led by Martin Kruse, who is the project lead and foresight expert. Other members of the team are experts in the health area: Aaron Spisiak, Jean-Max Wakim, Patrick Henry Gallen. On behalf of the Bulgarian Association for Personalized Medicine, we have also a small team led by Dr. Dimitar Georgiev and the researchers that are backing the project are Gergana Kjosovska, me, myself, Vensislava Dacheva, and our junior researcher, Branimir Velinov. So what is the focus of our lab? the main and long-term focus is to address the increasing cost of the healthcare in Europe and especially in Bulgaria, using strategic foresight and science-based co-creation. The lab's work is supporting the shift in the healthcare system from a reactive and treatment-oriented model to a proactive, preventive, and resilient one. Also, like the other labs, it serves as a collaborative policy space that brings together different stakeholders, policymakers, civil society organizations representative, scientific community, industry, and they all can design and test the innovative health policy solutions. So what challenges our lab is facing? Let's start with something more global, the increasing cost of healthcare. This is a phenomenon that is observed the last decade. On the left side, you may see the statistics shown from Eurostat comparing the figures from 2014 and 2022, and you can see how the increase in the how significant is the increase of the cost of the healthcare. And on the right side is another graph from the OECD database showing how this expenditure on healthcare, how it increased the share of GDP, so how much the cost for the healthcare are increasing. So this is not a typical Bulgarian phenomenon, but it affects the system, the healthcare system. And if we can have a look locally, so one side we have the fact that I have already quoted, the rising cost of healthcare. What are the reasons of that? So we have demographic development, aging population, that means the longer life expectancy, increased rate of chronic disease. On the other hand, we have the growing impact of the non-communicable diseases like cancer, diabetes, cardiovascular diseases, respiratory illness, and so on. It also puts a big stress on the healthcare and requires more spendings. And let's say the last one that is not such bad is the advanced use and application in technology, but also it requires much more funding and much more costs. So on the left side, these are challenges that are faced globally in Europe or worldwide. And on the right side, you can see those that are typical for the Bulgarian healthcare system. First, we have a limited focus, so let's say lack of preventive care. Although it's mentioned in most of the strategic and program documents, the prevention care or early diagnostic is not yet prioritized, so it's underfunded and under-implemented. And it's also connected with the limited health literacy and the patient engagements. Another big challenge that the healthcare system in Bulgaria is facing is the lack of the common interoperable digital infrastructure and a lack of unified system of collection of health data. That means everyone, each of the healthcare institution is using, let's say, its own way of collecting data. And when the moment comes to exchange data to do a quick reaction, you see the process could be very slow and need times to convert them. Anyway, it's very ineffective. And as a function of that, there is a lot of regulatory gaps. That means the technology that is already implemented and applied in different aspects in the healthcare are not enough regulatory baked. So there is still the regulation are lagging behind the implementation. So there are a lot to be done and to update it. The methodological approach of our lab. So the lab applies a future-oriented approach that explores policy responses to the healthcare system. The process starts by identifying critical challenges and therein the causes leading to that challenges, and Based on that, diverse scenario development are developed. The lab used a factor-based framework because it's more complex and can capture the different nuances of the Bulgarian context. And it enables much deeper exploration of different dynamics such as AI, the climate change, privatization, but how they can reshape the future. And a key component of our lab work is the participant foresight, so involving active stakeholders and working as a co-creation space, a collaborative space where the diverse actors can contribute from their point of view, from their experience and background. And this scheme represents the 5-stage model, but we are familiar, so we have, explore the scenarios, building scenarios, identify solutions, create and test policy, plan learnings, exploring the futures, identify solution, and create and test policy. We have held 3 workshops that were dealing with this part of the scheme, but we can come in more details on question and answer session. More or less, that model is applicable to all the labs within the project. And stakeholders. What are the stakeholders? So I'm sure that in the most of the lab, they have stakeholders from the similar groups, and policymaker, private sector, scientific community, civil society. Initially, we started with a very large list of stakeholders, but during the work of the lab, we have selected and we continue work with those who are more engaged, more active, more committed in personal and in professional way. We can say that we had a very strong support on behalf of the Ministry of Electronic Governance, and in particular the Deputy Minister, who is in charge of the digitalization of the healthcare system. Also, good support we have of a member of the Parliament, who is a member of the Committee on Health. And also we faced a very good collaboration with people from the National Center of Public Health and Analysis. And let me explain that this is a structure within the Ministry of Health. And when the Ministry of Health is implementing its policies, they are grounded based on the recommendations provided by this center. On behalf of the scientific community, 2 of the famous Bulgarian medical university were involved, and especially their faculty on public health, and also some centers. From the private sector, we experienced the support of 2 of the private hospitals and small and medium enterprises with different field of activity. Some of them were IT startups dealing with telemedicine solutions, some of them medical tests and technologies, and other leading patient support programs. So we try to cover a big range of different aspects. And also, of course, we had pharma companies. So pharma companies also showed interest in our work. Organization from the civil society that were really active and gave a value contribution to our work. Of course, first the National Patient Organization. 2 of clusters. One of them is the health and life science, and the other digital health and innovation. And also we have been supported with the Bulgarian Association for Drug Information, also another non-profit organization. And by these words, my presentation comes to its end. And I would like to pass the floor to Martin, who will represent the more interesting and exciting part of the work of the lab. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. So I'll just share my screen. Okay. Do you see my screen? So see full screen?
Yep, sure.
Okay. Let's just move here. So basically, I will move to the process that we did. So the first you could say the evidence that we used was basically a selection of a lot of data. The crisis that we're talking about here is not a new crisis in the sense that we're not the first ones that have looked at it. So it's the key here was really to look at what are the topics within health that can inform this potential crisis, specifically in Bulgaria. So what we did was we took a lot of existing data, so we didn't start from scratch, and then we we, we had a number of themes that we explored in the workshop. And what we did was really to take all these different elements, then use what is called an enablers and blockers framework. So what that does is it tells us first off where are we today, and where do we think that these individual elements, where will they be in 2040? So what will be the impact on Bulgaria? So we're looking not just isolated on the present, but also at the expected future. And then we look at the enablers and the blockers. So for each of these areas, there are certain blockers that are preventing these things from happening. There are certain enablers that will enable these things to come about. So an example here could be when we look into sustainability, we looked at some of the blockers was that it was mentioned that the current generations was not focused so much on climate change, and we needed younger generations to come into power, so we needed this generational shift. It was also mentioned that at present there was really a lack of environmental laws that and even though there was a lot of talk about climate change and sustainability, we still needed to see this come into force. So what could enable this change, this force, this driver to come about? Well, one of these things could be more educated people in the future, and we also see that there's entrepreneurs that actually find ways to find pockets of opportunity in the existing system. So they will kind of enable this move forward to come into effect. So by looking into all the different, first all the major themes, but also how these major themes play out across time and across these enablers and blockers, we get a picture of the challenges that we're facing. So the next thing for us is really the problem framing, and of course this is framed firstly in the sense that we are this approach framed from a context side. So where should we focus, and how does that what kind of scenarios which should we look into? That comes from this blockers and enablers analysis. But it also helped us frame the problem on a larger scale, you could say. So for us, and it was a little bit different from some of the other projects, And the problem we're looking into is that the crisis that we have identified is a future crisis. It's not just something that we'll see in coming next year, like we had a lab from Italy, they could experience a flood next year. So this is like a short-term acute crisis, whereas this is a slow-moving, long-term crisis. And that's important for several reasons. In the case of the Italian lab, we saw that people were acutely aware of this crisis and how we can create resilience around this crisis because they had experienced it just a couple of years before. Whereas this crisis is a slow-moving crisis. It means that um, other short-term issues are oftentimes more important. So people are aware of the fact that this is happening; they can see it, but still, it's some of the things that might have not so much of a focus in the way that we work with things. So that's an important in terms of the way we understand the crisis. Also, this is a crisis which is not defined from a healthcare perspective only. Why is that? Well, if you look at uh, the cost to healthcare that we saw, which is increasing as a share of GDP, basically what that means is that it is eroding other areas. We can't afford the healthcare system, the military spending, the climate cost, and the education. We can't have every part of those costs in the pie increase. Something needs to give. So that makes it a societal problem. It also is a societal problem from the sense that the solutions is not just coming from within healthcare. So if we're looking at something like smoking, we need to prevent smoking from happening. This is a question of how we tax things in terms of how do we engage people in changing of habits, and this involves a lot of other actors rather than just people within the healthcare system. So, and this especially goes for a lot of the issues when we talk about prevention. Uh, this is also, for this reason, very much a cross-sectoral collaboration, which is between ministries. It's also between private sector and the public in general. So from that perspective, it's kind of a different animal than a lot of different other crises that we're dealing with. So from a conceptual point of view, what we could do is really look at this from data for futures and having this in the back of our minds. So Jim Data did this many years ago, I think back in '69, where he looked into 4 different futures. Now, his framework is very much a descriptive framework. So he looks into how do we look at the future? How do we think about the future across novels, sci-fi, across government reports? And one way of looking into this future is a continued growth consideration. So this is basically how we think about things that we will continue to grow. But there's also another way of looking at it, which is the collapse scenario. And the collapse scenario is basically the crisis scenario here. So that could kind of work for us as a crisis point of view, so to speak. So what is the crisis or the collapse scenario? We see that in the Malthus trap or the Malthus curse. We see that in limits to growth. We see that in fiction, The Matrix or Terminator. So all the way that we talk about the future is either oftentimes binary in the terms of collapse or continued growth. So this is a framework that, in a sense, works well as a conceptual background for the situation where we have here. Because what we really want is we want to look into a transformative scenario, one that moves us away from a collapse scenario and into a transformative scenario. But the problem with Data's approach is that it's descriptive rather than prescriptive. So we wanted to change that using a fact-based approach. So, so what we did here was really to through the different workshops, identify what are the factors that we are looking into that are important for the Bulgarian healthcare system. And what we came out was 3 variation scenarios. So we continue to have the crisis scenario, the fact that we are looking into a crisis, not just in Bulgaria, but in many other countries. But instead of just prolonging the present, we need to also acknowledge the fact that there are other forces at play here that will play out completely different in the future than they will today. So we cannot just extend the present. We need to look into how those different futures might impact us. So this the business as usual crisis scenario needed to be informed by other scenarios as well, and those were private sector governments. The fact that private sector could play a larger role in healthcare system in Bulgaria. There was another approach, which is the need for climate governance and the impact that climate change might have on the healthcare system, which is an important thing to look at as well. And there's AI that will have an impact on healthcare, both positive and negative. So this kind of informs the way that we look at the future of the healthcare system. So having that framework, we moved into having those scenarios developed. We moved into a scenario workshop where we looked at each of these scenarios. So first off, we wanted to have validation. Are these the scenarios that we actually agree upon? The dynamics within the scenarios, are those the ones that we're actually seeing or could expect? And then we went through a SWOT analysis, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. So we're looking at these 4 scenarios as potential variations of crises or threats, but also in some cases opportunities, particularly in the case of AI, and identify what are the actual strengths and weaknesses that we have from within the system to counter this. So having done this, we can look at a SO strategy. So the strengths we have in the system versus the opportunities that are out there, or the weaknesses that the system have versus the threats that we're seeing. That in itself creates a strategic map for us that informs the policy making. So that gave us initially some thoughts as to what kind of policies that we could expect that would help us in these different situations. We also went to the knowledge base to look to what extent these policies already existed in the knowledge base, and what policies that could otherwise inform the problem that we have. Having these policies, we did a modeling, so we looked at these 4 different scenarios, and having the policies that could move us from a crisis into this resilient, transformed healthcare system. So moving into the transformative scenario, kind of, we did a wind tunnel where we looked into each of the different policies, to what extent they would work across the different scenarios, and in that sense would be stress tested. You could say they would be more resilient in 4 different futures, and based on that, we could develop a different set of policies. So 3 key policies that came out, or policy solutions that came out of this work, was strengthening the early detection system. So implementing a robust surveillance and diagnostic capabilities to identify emerging pathogens. which would help to lessen the impact on both individuals and society. And it also reduces the impact on healthcare workers, especially in when crises actually emerge. We also saw a policies here that would be beneficial. So creating a healthier, more stable healthcare workforce contributes to a broader public health and national resilience. It supports job creation and economic inclusion, and it promotes equity and social justice. And you could say it also underpins the sustainable development goals, and it creates greater security and societal protection. Thirdly, we had this enhanced the health information system. Now, there's already been a great deal of work done in Bulgaria on this, but this creates better healthcare. It reduces redundancy in costs and empowers individuals. So patients get better quality and access to care through the various digital platforms that they can have. And through this, they experience more personalized care, and they benefit from faster and more informed and even more precise medical decisions. And in reducing the redundancies and cost, it is one of the things that will make potential crisis less, in the sense that we have this cost increase. And of course, by empowering individuals, it also empowers them in terms of their access to information. So other supporting policy solutions that we looked into was how to have a digital health information ecosystem. So one of the things here that would cut across a lot of the different areas would be strengthening the public and private partnership that could accelerate development and implementation of locally relevant solutions. And this is important for uptake of various, especially technological innovations, and strengthening shifting from a treatment to prevention, so using predictive analytics and digital tools for detection and community health promotion. And this is, of course, important because it reduces the cost in the long term. And leveraging digital health technologies and AI, of course, this is something we need to look into, how AI possibly can reduce the overall cost of the healthcare system, which it could quite significantly. And of course, we need governance and collaboration. So establish a multi-stakeholder governance network could be an idea. So again, as we saw in the earlier lab, this is very much a way to prevent silo thinking within government. So in conclusion, what we can say is that if we strengthen the early detection system, safeguarding society in times of crisis, and enabling timely crisis management, that is in itself, of course, a way to create societal resilience. Investing in healthcare workforce resilience, it enhances national resilience and security, and enables societies to better withstand and recover from crises like pandemics and climate change. Contributes to a broader public health and national resilience. And by enhancing health information system, we reduce costs and enhance emerging response capabilities and strengthen social resilience to withstand those shocks. So all in all, creating greater societal resilience. Lessons learned. Well, foresight can inform the policy-making process. Basically, you can say the same lessons learned that from the former lab, I think from all the labs, basically. But also, I think it's important to say that foresight is about capacity building to a large extent. and it's more difficult in times of crisis because people are more short term. And you could say that the Bulgarian healthcare system is embedded in a political reality, which is where there's a significant amount of political turmoil and shifts in governments, which in itself can be kind of provoking more short-term thinking. But still, we had a lot of participation and engaged participants, even though this background is still the case. Success requires political commitment, and that means, of course, it transcends electoral cycles. It requires multi-stakeholder collaboration across sectors, and we had a lot of different both private sector and government involved. And it also requires systematic implementation, and that balances these long-term visions with the short-term needs. So this is, of course, something one needs to consider when doing this. In terms of local impact, there's community engagement. We did bring stakeholders together to discuss this very important topic, which is more for the long term. This is contribute to great awareness about this problem and enabling them to co-create solutions where they are helping to design policy solutions that will take these longer term issues into account. And it is itself a process like this is capacity is an aspect of capacity building, that they get the chance to get the time to think about these long-term issues and how this might actually embed into short-term problems, and how that short-term and the long-term can be combined. And we think that this has created lasting connections among the participants, among stakeholders. So it has enhanced the network and partnership, and this will continue beyond the lab itself. So I think with that, that is all for us.
Thank you, Martin and Wenceslava, for the presentation. I think that was quite a nice picture of the Bulgarian system, and I think that's also replicable to other cases to some extent. And I would like to give the floor to Philin Worke for the comments part of the webinar. Philin.
Yeah. Thank you, Matthias, and thank you both IMMER and BAPEMED teams. I have to say, even though I know both labs quite well, I found it fascinating to listen to them also together. At first sight, one could say you thinking back on this framework we gave on how to work through the foresight, you both represent opposite ends of the spectrum, how you interpreted this methodology. So IMMER went for 2050 and BAPEMED more for a midterm 2040 horizon. IMMER went for a disruptive crisis, and BAPEMED, as Martin emphasized, looked at a slow-moving crisis. Then IMMER went for energy and mobility, BAPEMED went for health. The IMMER is a cross-regional community, where the BAPEMED is a national. And IMMER used a narrative, science fiction-based approach, and BAPEMED used a highly analytical approach. So one could say really two ends. But what I find fascinating that I also see several commonalities. Actually, for example, I think Jean-Laurent mentioned you were aiming to push people out of their mental comfort zones. And you use these science fiction stories for this. And when I saw the graph Wenceslava started with, the OECD graph of the rising costs of the healthcare system, this is even so, it's a graph from today. It's also something to push people out of their mental comfort zone. So you can use very different techniques, one grounded in today's developments and another grounded in the very far future. But I suppose both serve this purpose to push people out of their comfort zone. Then when working with scenarios, I think you both focused on the actual the participatory parts of the process on the working with the scenarios, not so much putting much effort in defining the scenarios, but using the scenarios. You both put a lot of emphasis on this SWOT analysis or TOSA analysis in the case of IMMER. So I find this really interesting. And also in both cases, even I think IMMER didn't explicitly call it wind tunneling, but in reality, it's the same approach because you focus very much on the transversal aspects in the end, transversal conclusions from the scenario. So the things that came out independent of the crisis you talked about. And this was the same in BAPEMED. So I would say, even though you interpret it completely differently, the basic idea of learning resilience aspects by looking at a range of scenarios is very well implemented in both cases. And in terms of outcomes, I also find it fascinating that in a way, even though IMMER started with energy and mobility, if understood correctly, you also ended up with health. Because I saw here one of your main conclusions that health and aging is a very important factor in defining how well you can react to a crisis. And another thing I saw in both is, of course, the important impact of climate change, and also, even so.
Comment couper le micro, le bruit du monde? Oh, sorry.
And even so, IMMER, you used the disruptive crisis. I think you also emphasize the importance of slow-moving developments, because when you went back step by step, you also describe how this, it seemed like a disruptive crisis at the time, but when you look back into how this crisis emerged, you saw that your system has been, your systems were eroding slowly before this crisis happened. And in a way, so this is a very similar situation as in BAPEMED. And final point in terms of outcome also, and this is very much in line with the topic of our seminar today, the governance aspect, the importance of the governance aspect is clearly a strongly shared challenge identified by both labs. Of course, in the context of a cross-regional, you have other multi-level aspects to think about, as in the context of national. But yeah, I see this as a very strong point. And the question I would maybe have to both, I don't know if I'm already beyond my time, but maybe this can also be a starting point in the discussion. One question I would see from IMMER to BAPEMED, because Jean-Alain mentioned this learning from the process, that you need people with an appetite for this kind of thinking, and that can function as, you called it knowledge angels, right? That can function as knowledge angels in the organizations. I was wondering whether BAPEMED came across a similar thing, that it's important to find the right people. Not everybody is, even they may have high-level functions, and they're maybe not the so suitable participants for such exercise, or how to find them. But maybe more cross-cutting. I was wondering, this emphasis on data collection, this was very strong in BAPEMED, early identification system. This was one of your conclusions. But if I understood correctly, in IMMER as well, this Neo-Portalan approach, isn't it also a way of, a new way of capturing data? Or you called it a new way of navigating and keeping track of the future in a way. So is this a cross-cutting conclusion that we need to be more careful how we observe the present in order to be resilient for the future? Maybe that's a question for both. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. So,
should I answer the first one?
who will start?
Yes,
well,
please, Martin.
Martin
Okay,
will.
Jean-Alain.
Well, okay, very short. So thank you for these remarks. I can start with the last question concerning our IMMER proposal of starting or helping a sort of neo-Portugal. It's of course it has to do with data. Maybe not data like I would say statistical data or technical data. It's also data on or sort of ideas. So what is successful, what is not successful, what should we do before, and what can be done after, etc. So the Portugal at the beginning in the navigation system some centuries ago was of course about collecting data because the existing maps were very not precise, but also because the reality changed. For instance, when the boat went through a channel going to the harbor, it's possible that the sands have changed their place under the water, and the things are not exactly as some years ago. So the best is to have the very last experience, and for that you need to have the maps rewritten permanently. You cannot stand with a database coming from 10 years ago. So this is the intention.
It can be regarded as in industry since 30 years as a quality management system, which is always to be improved every day, and which is always actualized. It could be regarded as the same kind of process.
Yeah, fascinating. I think it relates to the BAPEMED conclusions on early detection system, even though it sounds much more operational, but I think it's. I don't know, Martin. Yeah.
First of all, the early detection system was very much on our side. It was very much the experience from COVID, I think, that was in the background. So very concrete in terms of future crisis. What can we learn from the existing crisis that we just been through? And on the first question, I think so. You asked how do we get the right people in the room? So I think this is a problem for all foresight projects. So what we did here, we did an invitation, so people could read this invitation and they could join. So of course we hope that the people that come are the people that actually find this invitation relevant for them and find it to be interesting. So I think one of the issues that one might face is sometimes you send out an invitation and a manager asks someone else to come. So that manager might have the interest, but the person which is asked to come doesn't necessarily have that interest. So that means you can't just have an invitation sent out and expect people to be engaged when they arrive. And that means facilitators need to create that awareness of the need. Why should you be here when we start the facilitation? So what we did was we started out by describing various types of crises that we are familiar with at the moment that we're seeing, but also looking a little bit back in terms of what crisis have people already expected? Because people have been in the same situation that they are in precisely now, that they are looking into the future and they go, okay, we thought that we knew what the future would be, but we also was in that situation in the past and we were surprised. So giving giving themselves that reflection in terms of have you experienced this before is a means to overcome that. That creates the awareness of why are we doing this. And secondly, that's very important in different scenario processes. You go through the valley of death at a certain times in a project, and if people are not engaged enough, they will disengage in that valley of death. So you oftentimes see this decrease of engagement. So it's very important for creating the awareness and the engagement when you actually meet people at the first go.
May I add something on the question of the participants? Yes, you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Yes. Well, you're right to use this wording of knowledge angels. We developed this concept specifically with Emmanuel Müller years ago in another concept, but it has something in common. These people are not just belonging to their institutions or organizations. They have their own personal vision, and they can diffuse new ideas within their organization. So it's nice to track the right persons to participate in our workshops. First, because if they are individually very committed to the future, interested in the future, or fearing the future, etc., they will participate very actively in the workshop. So the workshop will run more lively. Okay, this is one thing. The second is that they act as knowledge angels within their organizations. So what they have learned, they will diffuse it. Didier spoke also about problems of organization management. It's very important because in an organization, people tend to work in silos because they are evaluated for the jobs given to them. So if you are interested in very future-oriented issues, many people say, I'm losing my time because I will not be evaluated on these very general topics. I must do my own job. So everybody in the organization tends to stick to his or her silo task. So this is an organizational bias. But fortunately, some individuals are happy to lose time on such topic because they are individually very committed. So it's why they are interesting persons to deal with.
Yeah, the cross-silo aspect was also strong in BAPEMED conclusions. So this seems to be indeed a key factor in blocking resilience. Yeah. I think Emmanuel has raised.
Yeah, but due to
I think
sorry. for the time being, maybe I would like to give the word to Kathy to read the questions of the participants, and then maybe we need to close. It's already time for the webinar, but I would like to give the chance to have the questions from the participants. There is one from Ong, quite interesting. So, Kathy.
Yeah, thank you, Matthias. Thank you very much to all of you. Maybe there is someone that is still sharing. Maybe we can stop sharing the screen so we can see each other. And I'm just reading the question, like in the QA question. Please, you have a couple of minutes. I will read it, all of them, and you have a couple of minutes to answer so we can finish more or less on time. The first one is from Angta. Is how can we enable the implementation of local initiative connected to the regional agenda for social resilience? How can we ensure the policymakers are aware of the needs of society and how to avoid policymaker and silo thinking. And the other two, so maybe we can, like you can answer like all of them together if you can. For Immer, how to deal with people that may not be interested in the topic, crisis or approach, either science fiction or other. Crisis may impact all of us independently of our interest. And for BAPEMED, how to deal with slow-moving long-term crises in the face of changing generation and how people make sense of reality. For instance, have the topic of working on patient literacy came up. Beyond reforming the system, the work with patients is crucial to improve resilience. Literacy is a continuous effort to make. So if you want to answer to all of that together, or if you want to have space for all, then please try to be short so we can close more or less on time. So who want to start?
I can start very shortly.
Perfect.
On the question of how to put incentive on the people that are not spontaneously very interested in the future, or think that let's live the present life and we'll see. It's difficult to answer very generally to this question, specifically if we consider the organization, and within the organization who are very passive on that point of view, who is very active, etc. But we can act on the public at large, and this is the last point of our research, and it was dealt with the last workshop. What sort of information or incentive should we give to the public at large? What are the best entry points? One of the conclusions we had discussing with the stakeholders on that point was that school is an interesting place for motivating people, because you motivate the younger people, they will live the future. And second, you also contact indirectly the parents, because if the kids could be good diffusers or transmitters of issues to the parents.
Thank you very much. And I don't know if someone want to add something or answer to the other question.
Emmanuel is still raising his hand.
Yeah, maybe
Yeah.
Emmanuel, if you want to ask a question, you can write down to the queue. In the meantime,
you can just pose it. I can answer.
Yeah, sure.
I can't remember the questions.
Okay, so one of the questions is how can we enable the implementation of local initiative connected to the regional agenda for social resilience? How can we ensure that policymakers are aware of the need of society, and how to avoid policymaker on silo thinking? And the other one is how to deal with slow-moving long-term crises in the face of changing generation, and how people make sense of reality. For instance, the topic of working on patient literacy came up. Beyond reforming the system, the work with patients is crucial to improve resilience. Literacy is a continuous effort to make.
A lot of different questions. First of all, I think future literacy is highly misunderstood. I look at future literacy, which is maybe not so important in this regard. But if you read Miller's book, very much of the people that talk about future literacy are talking about it from a capability point of view, a competence point of view, whereas Miller really wanted to emphasize other things as well. But in the term that is generally understood, Yes, so in all the labs, of course, building this capability for people to have competences within foresight is an important thing, and it needs to be embedded in practice because people can do a course or they can do something like this, but unless it's embedded within the everyday practice, it becomes a little bit more difficult simply because people don't have the time to this. So they need the resources. And they need the ability from management, depending on where they're sitting in the organization, to get this done. In terms of the generational part, I think it's difficult to answer that in any absolute term. I think first of all, it depends on the different topics. Also, if you look at studies on generational longitudinal studies, they don't show you. There's a lot of immediate data that shows you there's a big generational gap. But if you look at longitudinal studies in terms of generations, they're not that different. So a person which was young in the 60s is not that different from a life perspective from a person which is young now. So we're kind of locked in this way that we looked at people from where they are now, rather than looking at them in terms of the age they have. So I think this is something that we need to be aware of. This is seen in many studies where we ask people what do they want to, like if you want to move into if you ask people 20 years ago, do they want to move into a collective housing? And they say yes. And when they actually become 80 years old, they don't want to move at all, because when you're 80, you don't want to move. So so we have a tendency to think that this is a generational thing, which is actually an aging thing. Yeah, I can't remember the other questions.
I think that thank you very much, Martin. Maybe we can close with the last one and give the floor to Matthias, because people from the audience ask what will be the next steps for each lab and future resilience as a whole. So maybe we can close with this one and see which are the next steps.
Yeah, thank you, Kathy. Thank you, everyone, and really sorry for keeping you with the time. We know we are a bit over, but I think the different labs, they have each of them set up a very specific sustainability plan. So they have, I think one of the key aspects of the labs is that they have already mobilized and put together different stakeholders in the different areas. So they started working together, getting to know also foresight for many of them. And I think that was already a good achievement. And I think that's a key ground for furthering the collaboration. We have already also the case, for instance, just because they are here as well, the lab of Didier and the IMMER Lab, they have put together also other projects, and they are working in the region with different actors. And I think this is the kind of activities that we also look for, is like people get more and more interested in working with thinking about the future, but also trying to create more resilience in societies. If we move, for instance, to the project level, what we could anticipate is the next step is around end of October. We will create, or we will launch already, a policy roadmap in which we will set up all the learnings from the different labs and give a sort of ingredients book for people to use different type of foresights, working with different challenges and providing with different ideas of how you could approach the work with different type of audiences based on specific context. So this policy roadmap is aimed for policymakers, but our idea is also to make it also readable by different type of stakeholders. So each of you could use it and hopefully exploit it for your own activities. And about the next steps of the Future Resilience Project at all, we will come up with more news towards the second half of this year. We have our final event, and the project is coming to an end in December, and we may we may make new announcements towards the end of the year for the future of the project. Saying that, I would like just to maybe close here. Thanks again to all the speakers and the participants for staying with us for a bit longer than expected. It was a pleasure to share this webinar, and also in thanks to the previous webinars to share a bit the results. And thank you, Asimina, because that's also a very interesting thing for all the academic community and also anyone interested. We are also having a special session at the ERSA conference in Athens in August. So there we will be sharing also different results from the project. So if any of you will come to Athens, that would be very lovely to see you there. So thanks again, everyone. Have a good lunch and a good evening, and keep enjoying summer for those staying on holidays or going on holidays soon. See you.